we travel from down the 401, down the 427 and QEW, and all the way to Hamilton. And we go to Forge. That's right, the two-time champions who were knocked off their perch by Pacific on one cold day in December last year, as Pacific took the crown from them. But they are the two-time champions for a reason. They are also a team, the only Canadian Premier League team, who has played already here in a competitive game in 2022. It's been a bit of an interesting preseason for them because they've had two. That's right. They came back a lot earlier than everybody else to prepare for that glorious two-legged tie against Cruz Azul. Boy, oh boy, was that spectacular. They kept them close in the first leg and then were very competitive, scoring a goal in the famous Estadio Azteca in Mexico, and then obviously competed very well in the last 16 of the CONCACAF Champions League, which is just a phenomenal achievement for a club of that. And trust me, Mexican teams, all teams all across Central America, scouts, asking many of us in Canada, how is this team and how is this league doing it? So congratulations to Forge. And they are not the champs, but they come back with a little 2 on the sleeve now, a little new addition to the crowd for the two-time champions. And if they're not the champs, you could still make a case, Charlie, that they are still the favorites. A very deep team with some big-time additions, taking 2 players from the champs, and, of course, a lot of continuity again, which has been the theme of Forge since day one.
Yeah, it's always very difficult to pick against Forge, just based on the consistency that this team has shown over the years. They have never once been easy to beat. They've very rarely ever taken a game off or had a day where you like that was a bad game for them. That's very, very rare from this Forge team. So to have the same kinds of key players, Kyle Becker, Tristan Borges, Alexander Shinyote-Janssen, all over the pitch, these players that have played at such a high level in the CPL, they've been, all of them have definitely been through at least phases where they were the best at their position in the league. Some of them there's arguments that they still are. This is a team with a ton of talent that have played together for so long. They're just so in sync with their tactics that Bobby Smirniotis has been laying down since day one. They're always going to be an incredibly difficult team to beat. And they've made some of those additions. They're deeper this year, I think. Ashton Morgan comes in, Kwame Awuwa goes out. Obviously, Kwame was one of their best players last year, had a phenomenal season at left back. Ashton Morgan comes in, a very different player with a very different resume, obviously very well known and beloved in the Canadian soccer community. We've seen the level he's played at for the national team, for Toronto FC, for elsewhere in MLS or USL. We know what he brings. We know how important he'll be to that locker room. So certainly, I think that they've found their guy to replace Kwame at left back. And then, as you alluded to, Hajabrapor and Taryn Campbell coming in from Pacific. They got beaten by a team, so they poached 2 of their best players. Is pretty funny. But and again, that first game is going to be a lot of fun, because I'm sure Pacific aren't super happy about that. But they're, again, 2 very good players, and there's a lot of depth in that Forge midfield this year, especially with Hajabrapor coming in and Abubakar Sissoko, who again we saw play very well with Halifax at the Island Games, and it's really nice to see him come back into the league. So again, Forge, we know what Forge are, and I wouldn't expect them to be much different this year.
Yeah, they have since departed one of my favorites. I'm sad about that. I'm still trying to get over the loss of Lamani Cisse. Not going to lie, be very, very disappointed not to see him play. But they still have Ashton Janssen, another one of my favorites. We've got favorites on all these clubs, but as you alluded to, a lot of depth there. Maybe Janssen may have to play a lot of centre back right now. We have to make people aware that arguably the finest defender in Canadian Premier League, Daniel Kristian, starts the season injured, of course. Badly injured his knee last year in that big game against York in the semi-final and has not come back. So we'll find out how long that's going to be, but it's going to be a few weeks at least. But you alluded to in midfield, that might be one of the reasons why you can get Becker, Hajabrapor, and Sissoko in if Janssen is very capable to play in central defence, where they still have a lot of depth as well with Matusla, Dom Samuel, and other people there. Also, Noah Jensen is very high on the list of Bobby Smirniotis as well. He brought over and knows a player really well. Obviously played in the NCAA last year. Kwasi Poku comes over as well. Another player from TFC who's obviously getting some international recognition as well. As I said earlier, I sat down with a lot of these coaches recently, and Bobby Smirniotis is a fascinating character. Please check out my interview with him, 20 and 10, from building the perfect burger to sipping whatever he wants to drink in Athens. There's some great stories in that chat. But I won't share those with you right now. What I will share with you is, what do you actually think when you've got a great team, and how do you improve on it? Here was Bobby's answer.
I usually hit on this every season. It's finding the easier goals sometimes. I think we do a great job, and we score a lot of goals, and we scored a lot of goals in 2021 and been very successful. But I think there's moments in the game where we create a lot, we get into a lot of good positions, and maybe sometimes it's about just pushing the ball in the net. And sometimes that's a personnel type of thing. You need a people Inzaghi on the field who it'll hit him on the back of the head or something, and it goes in. So I think that's what it is. I think we just need to be a little bit more lethal in that final third, and especially in and around the penalty area.
As usual, I think that's a very astute point. 16 of 28 games last year, 1 goal or less, despite being a real dominant team. When they go off, they go off. I remember being at both these games last year, particularly. I've got them in my notes. 4-0 against Ottawa, where they blasted them for 3 quick goals in the second half at home last year. 4-0 against Halifax, where they blasted them for 3 goals early in the first half. And in both those games, they could have won by 8 or 9. That's how good they were. In those games. They were marvelous. And that's when you go, okay. And I'm sure Bobby Smirniotis is thinking, Terran Campbell now, you've got Emery Welshman. I know they've lost Babuli, but Emery Welshman only played last year. He only started 5 games. He came over mid-season. Woodward's-Pacius didn't play a full season last year. So finally, plus with goals in other areas, they probably think they've got their strikers now to counter that issue that he brought up there, Charlie.
Yeah, I think so. And that finishing it was something that Bobby talked about all throughout last year. But yeah, Woodward's-Pacius, I think, is a big one for me. The way that he came into the squad, I think at like the end of August only, and then almost immediately seemed to be banging in the goals. I think if he'd played the full season for Forge, he might have been in the Golden Boot race, because he scored I think he scored in both of those big games that you mentioned there.
Yeah.
So again, these are these strikers that Forge have brought in that they're hoping can just maybe find those easy goals, tap them in. They've also got players on the wings that can certainly score goals. David Chouanier keeps scoring in massive games. The dude scored at the Azteca a month and a half ago, which is no small feat. Tristan Borges is a former Golden Boot winner in the CPL, and he personally, as well as I think we're going to hear in a little bit, he wants to get back up to that level that he's shown in the past. Even Chris Nanko, if he's a little bit healthier. Omar Brownie is in the squad as well. I'm not sure when we're going to be able to see him, but he's another one with that kind of talent. So there's a lot of attacking firepower in this team. You can't necessarily put it all on the pitch at the same time, but I think Bobby will rotate the squad a bit and find out who's in form and who's able to start finding more and more of those goals for them this year.
Yeah, so deep, right? Wow, how do you get them all on the pitch together? Sometimes if you're chasing a goal, Bobby actually finds a way to do it. Some famous moments last year in CONCACAF games where he had Mo Babuli playing almost as a 6 and just throwing on as many goal scorers as he can.
They've had like 6 strikers on the pitch.
Yeah, 6 strikers on the pitch. So they also have arguably the best player in the Canadian Premier League in Kyle Becker, who is still back in their leader, and just a phenomenal player who runs games at this level. If you're new to it, go watch Kyle Becker play in midfield. He just runs the game. We could talk about particular individuals, many of them, but the next player we're going to focus on, I think, is important because he could be the one who takes this team to another level. Charlie alluded to him, the best player in 2019, got a dream move to Europe, came back on loan, and has admitted it wasn't quite the same last year for a while. Eventually was put in his favored number 10 position and started to flourish. Charlie recently sat down with that man, and his name is Tristan Borges.
Where are you guys right now? What is the mentality?
There's not really much to complain, especially going into this year. We're back to normal a little bit, or a lot more than recently.
Yeah.
But it's exciting times. I know there's a lot of motivation within the squad. There always is every single year, but just knowing how the year ended last year, I think it's a little bit more extra motivation going into this year.
Your first game is in Victoria against Pacific on April 10th on this pitch last year in December, not even that long ago. You had your championship taken away by Pacific. How hungry are you guys to get that back and head into this season?
For me, the way I look at it is, in a situation like this, you see it in all over sports. These questions are always asked after something happens. You go into the next year and everybody's always motivated. But I've said it in multiple interviews, multiple times, first year, second year, or any of the year, wherever I play, it's all about action more than words, right? So obviously there's a lot of motivation within the squad, just again, knowing what happened and how it ended. And, it was a very good year for us as a club. There was a lot of things we accomplished, and that was one thing that was in the beginning of the season we looked at. It was on our book that we wanted to accomplish, but we didn't, right? So obviously it's motivation every single day.
It was a tough year. You guys played, 40 games in like 4 or 5 months or something? How do you remember that year?
It's tough to forget, to be honest. Like I said, there was a lot of positives that come out of that, but it's a little crazy to be playing a game every 3 days, 4 days. But what's even crazier than that is the importance of the games. Just playing Canada Championship games against Montreal, and just going back into league and trying to get to the first place spot, and then you're going to CONCACAF. Then you got important games. It's difficult.
I don't know how maybe you feel you yourself had or did in that season. Obviously there were really good moments. There were some goals and some really great games, but maybe I'm sure you'd say as well it wasn't the same kind of dominance as your first year here. I know that fitness is tough, but how do you look back on that year personally?
For me individually, I think I could have done a little bit more. I wouldn't say it was my best season, but it's a learning period, right? I've been through already a lot of different scenarios, and it's just all about learning and recovering from it and doing better next time.
4 years now. How special is it, just what has been built here at Forge, and just the kind of the culture and the mentality that kind of comes from the top, comes from Bobby and trickles through the players?
Honestly, it's difficult to really explain unless you're in the environment. And I know I say that a lot, and a lot of the times that people ask how it is, but it's just, if you really look at the stuff as a club we've accomplished and what we've been through under the circumstances, it's remarkable. Honestly, to play in stadiums like Azteca, to play a club like Montreal, bring them to PKs, and just things like that. It's maybe in moments, when you're in the moment, you don't really realize it, but maybe a couple years down, when you see how big the league is going, you start to see, okay, this is what this team was doing at this time. It's special.
So now going into 2022 with Forge, obviously we've spoken about what's in place, but there's some new players come in, and there's a lot of new faces in the group, including the one that stole the championship from you.
I want to talk about that, man.
That game, Ali Hijabrapor was in here like 10 minutes ago. I think Tristan Henry made him apologize to the camera.
Yeah, man.
How do new players like that kind of come into the squad and get integrated with this group? Because you guys seem like you've been able to get players in even mid-season.
I think it's just us having that mentality and us having that culture here of just winning. I think us having the right culture, the right mentality is what makes it a little bit easier, that having that player, if he comes in having the same mentality, it's easy to fit in with our group.
What are you guys, or maybe you specifically, what are you most looking forward to about this season, or even about that first game in Pacific?
For me, to be honest, what I'm actually really looking forward to this year is just being back to a normal season again. Just being able to have a proper week or have a proper planning to go into a game, just for myself individually as well, taking care of my body, and just being able to have a normal season again. I think that's something, obviously, you realize after, not to take for granted. Every year it's always going to be exciting for a team like Forge, but I think having that first year back to normality and being able to have proper preparation for games and everything, I think it's really, really exciting for this year.
You guys have 3 trophies, technically 2 trophies, but one of them you could win twice, kind of on the table for you guys this year. What are the goals to win all 3?
Of course. That's our goal, but like I said before, it's all about the work.
Those 3 trophies include 2 Canadian championships. They get to play Toronto FC in their home stadium on June 4th for the 2020 title. And then, of course, like all Canadian teams now, have a shot in 2022. Fascinating interview with Tristan. You got a lot out of him there. And I know he sometimes doesn't always show that. So every credit to you. A great character. Love them or despise them, and there are a lot of people who do both in the CPL when it comes to Forge. What you cannot deny is that season, that's right, 2021 Forge will be one of the greatest seasons you will ever see in Canadian soccer professional history. It will never be repeated. I'm telling you, 40 games in 162 days. They went to El Salvador, they went to Panama, they went to Costa Rica, got through all of those continental legs. They went to Honduras, They got book the spot in the CONCACAF Champions League final. They got all the way to their own Canadian final. They lost very narrowly in a goal from a set piece. They took CF Montreal, the eventual winners who made it to the CONCACAF Champions League, to penalties over 11 rounds and only lost because their goalkeeper missed one. It was utterly a remarkable year. And as you can hear from Tristan Borges as he looks back, he's never going to forget it. But I think they're thankful, Charlie, that this year there's a good chance they may not even play that many games in far longer period in 2022.
Yeah, I think that is something that they're excited for. To accomplish what they did last year, especially the weeks that they had where they would, again, fly to Panama and then fly up and play Ottawa 2 days later and then fly back down somewhere or elsewhere across the country. It was remarkable for them to, I think, arrive home from Honduras, I think 2 days before they played the domestic league final.
Right.
It's certainly not, I wouldn't call it the ideal situation for them. So this year, with things a little bit more spread out, it'll, as we've said for every other team, it'll be easier for them to move their priorities around, focus on each individual game a little bit more. They don't have to necessarily rest players for another game coming up. They can put more of their focus on the league. I know that, they finished first in the table last year, even with all of that.
Yep.
But, that I'm sure that they would say that there's always room for improvement, games that they wanted to win that they maybe didn't. So yeah, this is going to be a big year for Forge, because again, for them to accomplish what they did last year and walk away from it with nothing to show for it, nothing physical, no trophies for that, I think it hurt them a little bit, because the 2 prior years they had come away with the CPL championship and they had that trophy to show for what it accomplished last year. They accomplished more. I think it's not even arguable that they did.
Yep.
But they don't have a trophy. They don't have, that feather in your cap that they've desperately wanted. So I think that Forge is desperately going to want to win at least one of those Voyagers Cups that they're eligible for this year. And they absolutely desperately want to get that CPL championship back, because they certainly did not enjoy having Pacific come to their stadium and lift that trophy in front of their fans.
They did not. I was very fortunate and blessed to be on the pitch interviewing those Pacific players who were celebrating, and I saw the look in the eyes of many Forge players. Yeah. And I think that look and that memory has been entrenched in their mind, and it will be very, very at the forefront on Sunday. That's right. A rematch of that game kicks off Pacific season and Forge's season on Vancouver Island, live on OneSoccer, 7:00 Eastern, is the 4th and final game of the opening weekend. Check that game out. The return of Ali Hodrabrapor and Terran Campbell to a ferocious stadium, getting ready to welcome in a champion. It doesn't get much better than that.